So if you want a more experience on how to get involved in the 2023 session, we have an advocacy series that already started, but we have one more coming up on the 3rd as well of January for tips for storytelling and engaging with the media. So I'll add those links in addition to any resources that are talked tonight in a follow-up email. So many of you already know about FOF and what we do, but for those of us that are new, I'm going to show you a short video about Friends of Family Farmers.
In 2005, Friends of Family Farmers started with a question: how can we promote and protect socially and ecologically responsible food systems in Oregon? Since then, Friends of Family Farmers has worked daily for small and mid-sized Oregon farms and to connect eaters with sustainably and humanly sourced local products. We are Oregon Pasture Network, a group of farmers and ranchers working to support the growth of pasture-based farming and healthy agriculture and responsible land stewardship. We are Oregon Farm Link, an initiative connecting land seekers and landowners across Oregon to help enrich Oregon's farmlands and provide farmers with more options for land access. We are InFARMation, an educational and information sharing series bringing the issues facing Oregon family farmers onto the radar of the broader community. Oregon family farmers work hard to feed their local communities. That's why we work hard for the farmers and for the eaters who depend on them. We are Friends of Family Farmers. Join us to build a more resilient food system together.
A carbon neutral meal kit company that even Mother Nature can't get enough of. Unexpected.
All right. Okay, we're going to move on now. So tonight we're going to talk about the raw milk proposal, something we feel is long overdue. 40 years ago, Oregon was home to more than 4,000 dairies, most of them small family-owned businesses. But Oregon has lost more than half of its licensed dairies since 1990. Today, over just 200 family-owned dairies remain in our state. We have some small family dairy farmers here to talk about the barriers they currently face. Taylor with FOF is here to tell you about the details of our proposal. And finally, Representative McLean will be here to talk about why this is important. But first, we're going to hear from Alice, our organizational director, about our process of creating this policy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alice Morrison. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the organizational director of Friends of Family Farmers. That means I'm one of two of our co-director team. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our policy creation process, because we're here to talk to you tonight about a proposal that we're bringing forward in the 2023 legislative session. And I wanted to bring you up to speed on how we got here and the steps we've taken to involve our stakeholders in the process, as well as, the historical and systemic changes that have brought us to this space. So one of the things that Brittany just mentioned is that we have seen a decline in the number of dairy farms in the state, and that's licensed grade A dairies, is what we're talking about. And I think that this proposal, raw milk, is about building an alternative to that dairy economy and creating pathways for the folks who want to provide milk to their community and provide raw milk specifically because it is a different product than grade A dairy in a lot of ways, appeals to a different consumer and serves a different type of dairy eater. And we want to make sure that folks can compete in the market and have a pathway to viability for their businesses for raw milk, because grade A dairy, as Brittany discussed, has become very industrialized in this state. We're home to one of the largest grade A dairies in the nation. Sorry, you can hear my dog moving around on the couch behind me. He's just getting comfy. And we, as a state, have welcomed these large industrial dairies, and that has shifted our grade A economy away from small producers. Where small producers have the opportunity to thrive, in our mind, is in the raw milk market. When you're bringing milk right to your community, and we want to make sure that we are using common sense, food safe practices to help folks expand their businesses and continue feeding Oregonians. So our policy creation process starts with that spark of an idea. And that is something that we, on this issue, have had for a long time through our participation in the Stand Up to Factory Farms Coalition. We've been very aware of the issue with mega dairies, and that translates to us supporting raw milk farmers through our Oregon Pasture Network, of which Sarah King, one of our speakers, is a member. Hi, Sarah, thank you. And also, this has come up several times in our biennial outreach process. So every 2 years, in the even numbered years, we go out to our community through focus groups and or listening sessions. We change what we call them based on how they're structured in that year, and our biannual survey. So this cycle, we reached 512 survey respondents through our family farm survey. That's farmers, farm system advocates, and community members. And then we also conducted 12 focus groups across the state with 80 farmers across the focus groups. 5 of those were regionally focused groups. We did the Willamette Valley, the coast, Southern Oregon, Central Oregon, and Eastern Oregon. And then we hosted a statewide session in English and a statewide session in Spanish. And we sponsored 5 additional focus groups at culturally specific organizations, so that organizations who serve a specific group of farmers can have those conversations within their community without us coming in and extracting. So we want to thank our partners at Black Food Sovereignty Coalition, the Raices Program, the Race Me Collective, Kasama Farm, and Seven Waters Canoe Family for participating in our focus group process this year. That all culminated in the policy report that Brittany put in our chat box, and you can take a look at all of the information that we gathered. And so when we take all of our historic knowledge of the problem, the data we've gathered from our farmer base and the communities that they feed, we then decided to take this issue to a more specific stakeholder level. Then we started meeting with other raw milk producers, including Sarah and Christine, who are on the call tonight. We started reaching out to raw milk advocate groups across the state, and also hosted a raw milk producer forum back in October to really run all of the ideas that we had around how to improve this system by the folks that it will live it every day. So that's kind of the process. It's not kind of, it is the process that we take to make ideas into legislative concepts. And then once we took all of that information, we approached our wonderful legislative champion, Representative McLean, who you'll hear from later tonight, and asked her to act on her beliefs in support of raw milk to bring this forward in the legislature. So we filed we had her draft up a concept for us. She submitted that by the deadline of September 23rd, and we just got back our draft from the Legislative Council, and the session will be starting in January, on January 17th. So that's when it'll be formally introduced at the beginning of the session. So Taylor's going to talk about the process a little bit later, and Rep. McLean will let you know some ways to get involved, but that's start to finish how we got here today with our concept to fight for better access to raw milk here in Oregon. So thank you all for coming with me on this this journey through our process, and I'll hand it back over to Brittany to move us along.
All right, next we've got two farmers. They're small farmers from the Willamette Valley that specialize in dairy cows. Sarah King, owner operator of Godspeed Hollow, and Christine Anderson, owner operator of Cast Iron Farm. Both of these farmers' feedback have been instrumental in our raw milk proposal. So thanks so much for being here. You could talk to us about your farm, your experience being a raw milk producer in Oregon, and the limitations of the current law.
Sure. Thanks for having us tonight. My name is Sarah. I have been producing on my raw milk location for 5 years. I am primarily milking brown Swiss cows. And I, of course, like to blame my friend Christine Anderson, who's on the call with us, for getting me into all of this in all of the best possible ways. Christine and I'm really fortunate to be friends with her and work with her alongside the industry. And we have just go back and forth a lot. The beauty about being in the dairy industry is it's small. And so when we're all working together, that's how we are able to help serve our communities the best way possible. So in the last 5 years, I have been really fortunate to have a really dedicated and wonderful following of customers that have supported me and my farm. So our farm is part of the Oregon Pasture Network. We do run 100% grass-fed operation only. We do also do biodynamic practices here at the farm, and so we are definitely on the fringe of the way that we're producing in terms of not necessarily pushing massive production here, but we are really focused on managing our property and pastures to the best as possible. We have been slowly converting this farm over from conventional hay ground to our operation as it exists now. So for us, cows are a really important part of our whole ecosystem here at the farm, and we are really we use every part of the ground that we have to operate it to the best that we can. So the raw milk program has been really instrumental for us. And we've been fortunate to have it become a successful business model here. The farm is definitely profitable, and it is working very hard to be a long-term sustainable program for us. So I think one of the things that, from a challenges perspective, I'm in Newburgh, and so there is a really dedicated following of people here in Newburgh that are customers for me, but I also operate drop sites in Beaverton and also in Northeast Portland. And I know that access for Beaverton and Northeast Portland is really tough. And so trying to, as a producer, trying to make enough production happen that I can fulfill drop sites, and then the logistics of getting to those drop sites on a weekly basis is less than convenient. And I have a lot of things happening around here any day and time. And so for me to have to exit the farm and go make a 2-hour run, 2.5-hour run to Northeast Portland every week is usually somebody's having to pick up the slack while I'm away. So one of the things I'm excited about this bill is allowing the off-premise sale option, which makes it easier for me to have some transport. And if we can also then expand into farmers markets, making the Portland market easier to provide to, that would be really wonderful, because there is not enough producers to service that demand today. So that is probably one of the biggest hurdles for me. Removing the cow prohibition, additionally, and I know Christine can talk about this a lot more than I can, is making way for an insurance option. So I am sure many of you today who are raw milk producers or have worked with your raw milk producers, a lot of us operate on a herd share model as a self-insured policy, because if you are a raw milk producer in the state of Oregon, we likely don't have any commercial liability insurance to cover our farm. Huge risk and huge exposure for us. And that's all because we're milking a couple of cows, and that's really difficult. So that I'm hopeful in this particular case that we can pass this piece of legislation, because I really would love to see the option for our producers to have insurance coverage. So Christine, I'll let you
Great.
take over.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm not joining via actual Zoom. I'm on my phone at the Athens airport. So if you hear background noise, I apologize for that. I have been a raw milk producer since coming on 15 years now. I was involved in 2012 with kind of the beginnings of an organization called RAMI, whose focus was to kind of look at raw milk and figure out what safety factors are involved in raw milk, and kind of around that same time, and make some common practices that make it safer to be a raw milk producer and a consumer. And that organization has been instrumental to my success. Around that same time, I was involved in helping kind of release the advertising ban that was currently involved with raw milk. So I'm really excited to be a part of this process with support from FOSS, because this really is a community initiative. My challenges over the years have been many, and as Sarah has said, we are dealing with the insurance factor of a person who wants to be a raw milk producer can do it, but you're kind of being asked to do it on your own. I personally have had my insurance policy canceled just on my farm that covers also my home. So this policy had a restriction that specifically excluded any raw milk type situation that covered, my home if, say, the house were to burn down or something like this, and losing that policy and over, just the politics of how insurance and things work. We've lost that policy because we are producing raw milk, and I have no other options to get insurance as a farmer. So to be milking my 3 allowable cows or 2 allowable cows, however that works in the law, I'm being asked to do it in a kind of just by self-insuring. And that's definitely a struggle to me. And I am seeing a huge uptick in people who are interested in safe raw milk. And I feel like we have the technology available to be accessing that. I have a lot of farmers that are interested in starting their own programs reaching out to me for assistance, and I would love to be excited to expand so that we have a community where we can feed Oregon on a grassroots level, and that's what's exciting to me about this bill and this community. I'm not sure if I missed anything else.
Can either one of you or both of you speak to the food safety aspect of raw milk?
For sure. Yeah, so Christine and I are both Raw Milk Institute listed farms. And that means that we follow a very strict protocol in terms of our handling practices and our herd management. And keep in mind, that's entirely voluntary. Oregon doesn't require that, of course, not for raw producers. So there's the raw milk itself is absolutely safe for consumption if and only if you're producing it in a manner that is following practices and for both the milk handling as well as your herd management. And I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that you might think that you're doing well, you're being clean, but if you're not testing, you don't know. And there is that is one of the most important parts that Christine and I have really committed to with the RAMI group is testing processes that tell us whether the product that we're producing is safe. And so we're very very careful about how what we're doing. And I think as long as we are, this is the part I'm also very excited about in this bill is if we can provide access to training for producers or people who desire to produce, just to give the understanding of what is safe and what is the right way to do this. That is to me one of the most important parts. There's having there's a huge exposure to you if you're not doing it well, and I try to not scare people when I say that, because I just think, you know, if you're not going to do the diligence to make sure that what you're doing is safe, then you're potentially putting yourself and others at harm's risks. And ultimately, your animals are really important, and the herd management process is not easy and it's not cheap, but it is super important so that your animals are the best, in the best health to also be giving you the best product.
Yes, I absolutely agree with what Sarah has to say. With the addition of the fact that, yes, we are not living in the 1950s, and I get comments all the time from people who say, "Oh, I drank raw milk when I was a kid, and it was totally safe, and that was fine." Usually, that's someone who was milking their own cow on their property. There was a time when raw milk had a risk because we just really didn't know what was happening, and milk wasn't refrigerated, and it was a completely different world. We have science on our side now to tell us what does and does not make milk safe in those conditions. And as someone who is committed to the RAMI standards, we've looked at the pasteurized milk ordinance. So, you know, pasteurization is not sterilization, which means that there is some remaining bacteria, and all milk that goes in a grocery store shelf is tested after it's been pasteurized, and it has to meet certain bacterial counts. And what we do at RAMI is we've taken those counts and even lowered them. And when we test our milk, it needs to meet those standards. And we're continually trying to learn and see what's in our milk. Over 15 years, I haven't had a single reported illness from milk produced on my premises. And if you look at the CDC website on, you know, illness and deaths for raw milk, there hasn't been a single reported death for raw milk in quite a few years. I don't have that data directly in front of me, but it's not something that I assume that those that are on this call are, you know, advocates and are already there in terms of the milk, but we definitely have resources available to train a farmer to be able to produce raw milk safely. And those resources are very, very available. So I think that the factor that we have historically had with raw milk being an inherently dangerous subject is maybe that the circumstances have changed around that.
And what about the demand of raw milk? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think Christine and I can both say that, you know, we're running at a wait list at all times, and sadly, there's two reasons for that. One is that we have a lot of farms that have found it untenable for them to be able to continue producing raw milk, so they have gotten out of business, and so we're absorbing those customers. And another, there's just also a renewed interest in it from the general consumer base, and we have more and more people looking at raw milk as a health food product and a really whole diet consideration. And so there is no lack of demand for the product in Oregon. And I mean, I'm actually currently on a break from milking until the spring, and so is Christine. And so we are both sitting with wait lists asking for us to come back sooner. And that is, from a business perspective, it's a great problem to have. From the overall perspective, I wish that there were more producers to help service the communities in need. And I want those producers to be able to do it and do it safely and do it well, in order to really see this as a flourishing community in Oregon.
Yes, absolutely. As Sarah is saying, the circumstances around someone who is producing raw milk in Oregon make it very hard. So in the years that I've been doing it, have seen people who have come on for a number of years and then just
I think we lost you for a second, Christine. But I think what she's saying is that we've seen people come back.
That it's ultimately too much sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yes. And And we are also looking to, since the pandemic occurred, people have become maybe more acutely aware of the food system that they're operating in, realizing that a local food system is maybe the key to security. And I've definitely seen an uptick in people who are interested, maybe not just in raw milk specifically, but in having a connection to their farmer and knowing that they could drive to the farm and get food for their family. I am operating, as Sarah said, with a wait list, and I would love to get to all these people. There's no way that I could service everyone that's on my list as much as I try, just with the capacity that we have right now and with our farm size. My goal here specifically would be to, have as many producers join the club as possible. It definitely benefits me as a producer to have more people. Sarah is one of my very favorite go-to people. I was just texting her last night about things I needed from her as I'm abroad right now. And it makes it a lot more simple to be a raw milk producer when there are more of us and when we're committed. Only those of us that are doing this can, continue this action and to feed people that are interested. And we get up every morning and milk cows at 5 a.m. just to do just that.
Great. I think we'll wait and hear back from you. I'm sure folks will have some questions at the end. But next, we're going to learn about the policy proposal. So we have Taylor Sarman, who's our FOF policy on the FOF policy team, and he's going to give you the details of the proposal for the 2023 legislative session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brittany. And my apologies that my camera is not on. As luck would have it, Zoom decided not to let me turn it on today. So as those things are, but just really want to start by thanking Sarah and Christine for kind of laying the groundwork on this policy proposal. And both of them were so instrumental letting me come out to your farm, Christine, and see really things up close. I think that's always so helpful. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate that. And I thought what I would do is walk through kind of what the existing law is and what we would propose in 2023 in the legislative session. And then, of course, save time for questions that folks have, because I know we've seen some come in the chat. Want to make sure we get to those. So, essentially right now for our licensed dairies, dairy licenses are required to produce milk for goats, cows, or sheep on a grade A dairy farm and transport that milk to market milk for producers and process milk for manufacturing. That really exists in the licensed dairy category. I think what you heard Christine and Sarah talk about is this next category of licensed exempt dairies. And the law is a little ambiguous, admittedly, I will say that, but that really focuses on dairy folks who are not required for, if they own more than 3 dairy cows, no more than producing at one time, that have calved at least once, no more than 9 sheep that have lactated at least once, or no more than 9 goats that have lactated at least once. And as you can imagine, some of that is a little difficult to regulate. So that I will just leave it at that. And then, so currently, for folks who are operating under the licensed exempt dairies and are selling raw milk, are doing so, really in kind of a direct consumer model. And the law right now says that sale and that transaction has to happen directly to the consumer at the site where the product is being produced. And so for all of the folks who are on this call, that means at their farms, at their homes, et cetera. And this applies currently for those folks who are operating under the exempt dairy category. That applies for cows, goats, and sheep. And so the next kind of category, is we kind of know it, is the dairy sales for licensed dairies, for folks who are meeting that grade A standard. And what I think is interesting and of note for us all on this call is that right now raw milk of cows is prohibited. So it's impossible to ever become licensed. That's not the case for goat. milk. That's not the case for sheep milk. You could, in theory, go through licensure for those categories as well. And we'll get to the prohibition piece a little bit as I talk about what the proposal does. And then I think you heard Christine and Sarah talk about herd shares. I'll just note that the law, Oregon statute, isn't explicit one way or the other on herd shares. And historically, that has been a model that folks have utilized because there isn't any statute that kind of spells out a process for herd shares. So that's just kind of a quick rundown on the world as it is today, for the most part. And I'll turn now to the world as we will hope that it will be after July of 2023, after the legislature has come in and passed Friends of Family Farmers legislative proposal. So I kind of like to think about this. There are two categories. There is building on and expanding on folks who are in the license exempt category currently, and providing a little bit more privilege and opportunities for folks who would be selling raw milk for cow, goat, and sheep under the exempt dairy status. And the benefits that we want to add to this exempt dairy category is really to allow more flexibility for small producers to utilize, off-site delivery services, or take advantage of direct consumer opportunities at farmers market or other kind of farm to consumer environments where a small raw milk producer could sell at a food hub or some other direct to consumer facilitation of sale opportunity. And I think this one is the most important because I know some of the feedback that I've heard from folks, and as you heard Sarah and Christine talk about the demand of, having to have folks drive out to your dairies, oftentimes to pick up raw milk. Obviously the traffic of getting more and more cars out on roads is definitely not something that we want to do, especially in a lot of our rural communities. And so I think this policy proposal and this change would allow for a lot more of that sale to happen offsite, either at a farmer's market or being able to deliver directly, or use a third-party delivery service to get product to consumers. So I think of that as kind of the one change around exempt dairies. So really just kind of building on everything else that exists for exempt dairies today, but adding a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more opportunity. The second category, and this I think really applies, I've seen a couple of questions come in about insurance, and I think this actually would be helpful for some of the questions that I've seen around insurance. But currently Oregon law prohibits the sale of raw milk unless you fall into the exempt dairy category. And I think obviously for a lot of regulators and insurers, having an explicit prohibition in statute is probably what's driving a lot of the concern and a lot of the hesitation. Maybe not all of it, but I think that is a significant part because we have that prohibition currently in state law. So in terms of the bigger body of work that I think our policy proposal aims to achieve is, one, removing the explicit prohibition in statute and getting rid of this very arcane prohibition that prevents folks from being able to sell raw milk unless they fall under this dairy exempt category, specifically for cows. That ORS that prohibits raw cow milk doesn't include sheep or goat. So in some ways it would be putting in law parity for raw goat and sheep milk and apply those standards for raw cows. So that is kind of the first box to check. The second piece I think is a much broader, to allow for the licensure for a dairy that wants to sell raw cow milk in Oregon and explicitly set up a regulatory framework that would allow for that to happen. So, I mean, it would require licensure, it would require meeting standards for licensure, and it would also come with some additional training requirements that folks would have to either use through a third party or from a state training provided, and then require some standards for regular testing, risk analysis, and risk management. And that obviously is a much broader policy change that we would be seeking. So I like to think about them in terms of, a little, for the first one with exempt dairies, really just building on some privileges and opportunities that currently exist. And then for folks that want to go to the next level and want to go to that licensure level, providing a framework to be able to get there that, follows all of the standards that you heard Christine and Sarah talk about tonight. And I know that many, if not all of you are already doing, and allow a pathway to licensure. So that is just a quick summary. Of course, I want to thank folks who joined the producer forum that Friends of Family Farmers put on earlier this year. We've got some great feedback on there as well for some potential changes that are likely to be included in our bill as well. Mostly around taking another look at the numbers of animals that fall under the current exempt dairy category, and then maybe even just changing some language that would make more sense for how your farms and operations are actually currently working already in Oregon. So I will pause there, and looking forward to our question and answer session. And the one thing I will say as I close out too is that this really is going to be a big effort and a big push in the legislative process. And so we really will need all hands on deck to be able to get this, to get these policy proposals done. So I'll leave that as a call to action for you all, so that we're able to get this done in 2023. So I will turn it back to you, Brittany.
Great. Well, why don't we just get these questions out of the way? We've got a few minutes until Rep. McLean comes on. So the first one's, many small local dairies have been dropped by their insurance companies in the last year. Because of this, at least one that I know of has decided to stop milking altogether. Is FOF aware of this? Is there actions to address this?
Yeah, I think what I'm hopeful for, and I think we'll learn this throughout the legislative process, is that by removing the prohibition, that will be helpful for insurers to be able to actually cover these operations because they're not prohibited explicitly in law. I think one of the other things that we're going to be looking at in 2023 is just broadly for anybody that falls under an exemption, be it if you were on the other information where we talked about the farm direct marketing law, those operate under exemptions and what as well, and we want to make sure that insurance is provided for those producers who are operating under those exemptions, under the small dairy exemption as well. And so we may need to be looking at an actual explicit statutory requirement for insurers to cover those producers who are falling under exempt dairies or maybe the farm direct marketing law and exemptions there.
Okay, the next question. I've been trying to figure out some recent history on raw milk sales in Oregon. I know that just 2 to 3 years ago, a raw goat milk was available at Fern's Edge Dairy. It's sold in glass bottles in stores like co-ops. I've never understood how that was allowed. Then the farm was sold and new owners never seemed to get it off the ground, unfortunately. I wonder what changed. I know the people drive to Washington to buy raw milk at Chuck's. I don't know if that's actually legal. Anyhow, I'm excited to hear from all of you. Just curious how raw milk can get in the stores.
Well, I think the first thing is the licensure piece and being able to have a licensed product. So, today a raw goat producer could become licensed and could, potentially find themselves in a retail space. So I think that is really the big opportunity is getting that additional second piece that I talked about when we opened the policy proposal is the licensure. So setting up an actual agricultural pathway with regular testing, regular risk analysis, some reporting to get an actual licensed product that could go into a retail sales. Unfortunately, as the law is currently written, it is cow's milk that is prohibited under the ORS from being able to be sold. And in the scenario that Sarah, I think, was talking about at co-ops and other retail locations.
All right, a couple
And
more.
I won't pretend to speculate whether I know if it's legal to drive across the bridge into Washington and bring back raw milk. I think that's probably better for a lawyer to answer.
How does this affect raw milk cheese producers?
Oh, sorry. It said Alice Morrison is going to answer this question live. So I don't know if you wanted to answer that, Alice, or.
Oh, no, it just means I hit the button, but I can add that cheese production can legally use raw milk, but that cheese producer is licensed as a licensed cheese producer. So that's a different set of licensing. And if you are a licensed cheese producer, it's an additional set of licenses, but you can use raw milk in your product. So yeah, we're only talking about in this proposal fluid raw milk in just the plain milk form. But yeah, you are right that there are legal pathways for licensed cheese producers to use raw milk in their products, and this proposal would not change anything for them. Maybe it would make raw milk more available, and therefore they could make more cheese with it.
And maybe one more. I don't understand the exempt dairy portion.
Yeah, so currently, as long as you are a dairy who doesn't own any more than 3 dairy cows, and no more than 2 of those dairy cows can be producing, or that have calved at least once, and you can also, so that I'll just stop there. You are in that category, you can sell raw milk under the licensed dairy exemption that currently exists for cows. If you have no more than 9 sheep that have lactated at least once, that is another way that you can operate as a licensed exempt dairy and sell raw goat milk without having any licensure. And then, or excuse me, sheep milk. And then the same is true if you have no more than 9 goats that have lactated at least once. You can sell that milk and not fall into being required to license to be able to sell that milk. And I think one of the things I'll just flag, since we're talking about it now that we're looking at, is there's this question about, well, what if I have 2 cows, 9 sheep, and 9 goats, which I think is just also a great riddle that at some point I'm going to figure out how to solve. But if you fell into that category, would you technically be able to be a licensed exempt dairy, or does it require that you have to have just one of those types of animals? So hopefully that clarifies the exempt dairy and doesn't further confuse folks, but we can also always follow up.
All right, we actually have a couple more minutes. So what are why are the insurance dropping raw milk producers? And perhaps some of if Sarah or Christine, you have anything to add to any of these questions, please feel free.
Yeah, I think so Taylor alluded to this earlier in a previous answer, but because the sale of raw milk is not legal in the state of Oregon at retail and must be under an exempt, and you cannot receive a license for it currently, then and because it's not federally legal, then we cannot coerce and require insurers to insure us. And so that is a loophole that or a risk category they're not willing to step themselves into. So that's often why we're seeing that.
Yes, and I would like to hold on one second. I'm sorry. I also would like to add that in the Oregon Farm Bureau specifically kind of is not pro raw milk. And the insurance company, Country Insurance, who is associated with Oregon Farm Bureau, is kind of, dictated by what the Oregon Farm Bureau does or does not want to do in their political agenda. So that's a problem. So that's a factor, because Country Insurance would be maybe someone who would insure your farm. You can't just go to any insurance company and expect them to give you a farm policy. So already there's a very limited window of what is available. And then beyond that, if a farmer does manage to get a policy, it's specifically exempting raw milk. And then if a farmer has any kind of a claim, like we had our barn collapse and we had to handle this through the insurance company, that was a good reason for them to say that we were too high of a risk, even though this was a normal type claim that any farmer could potentially run into. It's just that they don't want to take on the risk of the exposure of the potential danger of raw milk.
Hey, Brittany, I know we're at 6:50 and I'm sure Representative McLean is probably jumping on just as we're talking, but there was one question in the chat about licensed small dairies being dropped from their liability insurance. And I think we need a little bit more information on that question. So I would love for us to connect with Elizabeth, if we could, to learn more about that situation, because I want to see if we can figure out a legislative fix if one is available for that. So I see your question, Elizabeth. That's all I'm saying, and I think let's have more conversation because I want to be responsive to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just want to reiterate that, we have heard about these insurance problems happening mostly with raw milk, but we've also been approached by folks, other service providers like OSU Extension, asking for help with producers who operate under other exemptions, like Taylor was saying, the farm direct producer processed exemption, the popular law that we helped to pass that allows people to bring pickles and jams to farmers markets, as well as the 1,000-bird exemption, which allows chicken producers, poultry in general, to produce and process up to 1,000 birds on farm to be sold whole directly from the farm to the consumer. Those exemptions are also facing things like this. And I do echo Christine's sentiment that these are private companies that are making these decisions, because these things are exemptions from law. And in the case of raw milk, it is specifically prohibited in law, which is part of what we're trying to fix with this bill. Private companies can make decisions about what they tolerate and not, and that is often driven by political will. So that's something that we're going to do our best to address. And the thing that will help us the most in that arena is if you or someone in your life, in your circle, has had a conversation with an insurance agent who's referenced these things or has been dropped. If you have some concrete info on those conversations and the factors that led into it, we are currently collecting that information. Brittany, could you put the survey that was in the last newsletter out? So we would love to hear more about the specifics of the situation so that we can try to address it in our policies going forward. Because we are hearing, like so many folks in the comment section, we're hearing more and more information coming out about folks being threatened with losing their insurance, and we really do want to address that in the best way we can.
Yeah, it's actually not a survey. It's just if you can email me your short paragraph of a story. I'm just collecting all of the stories and putting it together to analyze. Heather, do we know, have you talked to Rep. McLean? We'll just keep going with some questions until. All right, so the next one, is there a training and testing program for?
I think she's trying to log in right now. We're texting her.
Okay. Is there a training and testing program for current licensed dairies so that a whole new protocol doesn't need to be developed, i.e. money?
So there is a testing protocol and program for current licensed dairies, and it's pretty expensive. So that is definitely in place. I would keep in mind that if you're a licensed dairy, you're probably operating at a larger scale than small raw milk producers. So the testing protocol and even establishing the infrastructure that a licensed dairy currently might show is potentially more significant and cost prohibitive than what the raw milk producers are able to work with. So the RAMI Institute is really the forefront in terms of leading that charge, in terms of providing training and best practices, as including testing protocols for the raw milk community, and is able to help with establishing standards and practices of testing that are designed to be accessible for micro producers, in addition to larger producers. So that's the training and testing program for current licensed dairies is definitely at a larger scale, is intended for larger scale dairies, but certainly is applicable when you look at the testing standards that would be required. I would give the caveat that if you are currently looking at the Raw Milk Institute standards, those of us who are producing under those standards and practices are doing so with a higher level of scrutiny and required practice than licensed dairy requirements are. So there is, if you look at post-pasteurization testing result requirements for licensed dairies, they're significantly different than what we for raw milk production are being held to when it comes to or not even being held to it, we're voluntarily choosing to do it here in Oregon from the Raw Milk Institute standards.
Yes, and just to add to that, this information is completely transparent. You can go to either Sarah or my website or the RAMI website and see any test that has ever been run on our farm. That's not something that you see in a commercial dairy. And that's just something that we have developed to communicate to the consumer what exactly we're experiencing and what conditions we're running into for transparency.
Yes, and all of that information is also used in research for raw milk across the country and internationally.
Can one of you talk about who enforces the exemptions for dairies? Are food safety officers visiting all raw milk producing farms?
Sure, yeah. So it depends which county you live in and how many people are available to come out and take a look at what you have going on. So Christine and I are both located in Yamhill County. We both have a working relationship with our food safety officers in Yamhill County. Ironically, he comes from a large dairy producing family, so he knows exactly what we're working with and is wonderful to talk with and kind. Christine has been visited. I actually, for some reason, and we have not uncovered this mystery, have not. I am much more out there and extroverted and all over the world with what I'm doing and all of the crazy things I have going on. And I have not yet been visited, but Gary is welcome here at my farm anytime should he choose to show up. So Christine can tell you from a lived experience what that is like more than I can.
Yes, I was visited in 2012. What occurred was that a news article was published about something else related to my farm and mentioned raw milk. And then the inspector showed up and had said that I was advertising raw milk, which at that time was prohibited, and actually led to me challenging that portion of the exemption and was what happened when we opened up the access to raw milk there. I haven't been visited since then, and through that process that I experienced, I was able to work with the Oregon Public Health Authority on the raw milk scenario, and we kind of was able to communicate some of these factors about the safety that we go through, and they and they kind of started to see what we were running into as producers.
All right, I do want to address, this question is, we've kind of beat around the bush here, but Kathleen's question about why are cows so much more restricted than other species? I think I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but I wanted to explicitly connect the dots that licensed dairies in our state have gotten bigger. There are some wonderful pasture-raised organic dairies in the state. I know Ross Banson is here tonight from Double J Jerseys. Hi, Ross. Ross and his dad, John Banson, have been pasturing cows outside of Monmouth for a really long time. They're wonderful grazers and they've been doing it really well. But unfortunately, it's not the norm for dairy farms in the state. You all are an example. And I think that there is a push toward industrialization in dairy overall because of the system in the centralized food system as a whole. And when industries become more centralized and more industrialized on the whole, there is more political will to support those more industrialized facilities. And I think, as Christine pointed out earlier, there are some strong, anti-raw milk and anti small upstart dairy feelings out in the world in some of the organizations that control some of the insurance companies that insure farms across the state. And this is all speculation because we don't have confirmation from these folks that that's how it is, but we do know that the dairy system, the prices of milk are falling in the conventional system. And so you have to maintain profitability, and it is hard to break through those lines. So our opinion is that the cow section of this, the law is more restricted because of those interests. Because there is currently a licensure pathway for raw goat dairy and raw sheep dairy. The fact that cows are excluded, there's not, a food science reason for that. Our opinion is that it was an industry decision to have those folks excluded. So that's what we know so far, and I would love to be corrected if I am wrong.
All right, sorry, Rep. McLean's having a little trouble with the links. I'm just trying to make that happen.
That's okay. We can answer another question while we're going. Yeah, we actually, that's Sarah asks in the questions, is it legal to sell raw buffalo milk? That is something that I don't know and is not addressed in the current law. Taylor, have you heard anything about buffalo milk in statute?
I have not heard anything about buffalo milk, either raw or not raw, in statute, but that is a good flag for us to be thinking about too.
Yeah, we have several buffalo producers in the Oregon Pasture Network, and I've been to some of their farms, and they are a no-touch species. They're not like cows. You don't go up and play with them. So I would applaud you if you can milk them, but I'm sure that it would make a delicious cheese. That the American buffalo, I think, would be a very hard species to milk, but maybe that's a high-value product.
So if I can just step in here, what they're probably referring to is water buffalo, and they're milked a lot in Italy, especially to make buffalo mozzarella.
That makes more sense.
And, if this is not something that is currently being regulated or monitored, maybe we just kind of leave it be for now until it becomes a problem. But I'm currently under, as I understand it, I could be wrong, I'm not a lawyer, but under statute currently, someone can milk as many water buffalo in whatever way that they deem fit until an inspector says otherwise.
Yes, weren't we talking about starting to milk donkeys, Christine? That's our next adventure, right?
Donkeys is the next.
That's right. You and I will figure it out as soon as you get home.
As soon as, yes, absolutely.
All right, Alice, you want to take the next question?
Sure. Yeah, I do want to call attention. Thank you, Rebecca Ward from 3 Hen Farm, for putting a possible friendly insurance agent in the chat who might be able to help out with a policy when your business relates to raw milk. We'll make sure that we record that information in the follow-up email if folks are interested in reaching out. My disclaimer is we know nothing about this person and have never worked with them and do not benefit from anyone contacting him.
Funny, I think I might be the person that started sending everybody to this individual because he worked with me a couple years ago to craft this policy. And again, how I'm still holding a policy, and I knock on wood, like I'm curious about every day. But I will say it has been a good policy. It is not cheap for anybody that's thinking that it's going to be you can have cheap and you can have awesome, but you can't usually have both together. So you should be prepared for that.
I think Barbara has a question in the questions that I want us to address. So Barbara has more than 9 sheep that have lactated, but she milks fewer than 9. Would she qualify for the license exempt law or not? And as it stands right now, you would not be able to qualify for the exempt law because you have more than 9 sheep that have ever lactated. And that's something that came up in our producer forum quite a bit, that changing that have ever lactated to are lactating would be a beneficial change, because that would allow you to keep, you'd be allowed to give your animals a rest and have them not be milking all the time, or keep elderly animals that have aged out of milking and give them a good retirement on your farm as well. So that's a good question, Barbara. And right now, because there are more than 9 that have ever lactated, technically, no, you would not fall under the license exemption at this time. Looking at the other questions in the chat.
I think Rep. McLean should be on any minute. Let's hope. She's having a hard time getting on, so it should be just a second.
Yeah, and just a sec, I think that Ross has a question in the chat. Ross asks, have we reached out to the Oregon Dairy Association, and would they be opposed to supporting fellow dairy farmers regardless if they are raw or not? We have not reached out to the Dairy Association yet, and we haven't heard from them either, but they have been on the record opposed to past raw milk bills that have come up in the legislature before. So I am hopeful that we can engage in conversation and just, bring more people to the table in dairy. And that's hopefully what the Oregon Dairy Farmer Association wants as well, is just more folks raising dairy in Oregon. So I would love to speak with the Oregon Dairy Farmer Association, but they are on the record in opposition to raw milk bills in the past. So we want to tell them why it's different now.
Ross, I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for your support. I would, as somebody who is with your expertise and your experience in the dairy world, I would love to know your thoughts about ways that we can be good partners with those dairies as we're going through this process. I'm sure they're not really concerned about us taking consumer share away from them, not when we're, in not nearly a significant section of the pond for what the rest of the industry is producing. But I'm here, would be really curious to know, and I can assume some anecdotal feelings, but I don't like to assume. I would just love to know what the basis of the opposition is. And if we can find our ways through that. So if there's anybody that's going to be able to help us suss out that, I would imagine you're the closest closest one to that. So appreciate any insights you can give along the way.
Well, Representative McLean and I are trading text messages right now about trying to figure out how to get into this Zoom room. So if there's another question, Alice, or that we can answer.
Yeah, I think that there are more questions about whether or not cheese producers or other raw milk value added product producers are experiencing the same loss of insurance coverage. We have not heard any stories about food processors losing their insurance. And I'm not sure if that's because they are not also I would be curious to know if someone who is a raw milk producer who holds a cheese making license to use that raw milk for their cheese making is having the same questions. I live in Northern Lane County. I'm in Junction City. And we do have some folks here who sell product in Eugene who are licensed cheesemakers using their own raw milk to make the cheese. And that's a very good question. And I would love to check in with them about that. Because we haven't heard of food processors losing their licensing the same way that the producers are. But has anyone else on the panel heard of any cheese producers losing licensing?
I can specifically speak to that. I know that our dairy is looking in the direction of potentially becoming grade A licensed for our sheep in the direction of using raw milk for cheese production. And as I understand it, there are maybe one or two people who are doing this. The gal you mentioned in Junction City being the only person that comes to mind. But there is a difference between raw milk cheese and artisan farmstead cheese. I believe artisanal would be the word that they would use, because once milk is transported to a facility, there's all these nuances about the way the ordinances work, that milk that has been pasteurized actually is considered raw once it gets to a facility for production. So someone is making cheese on a much smaller scale using raw milk. This is just, there are so many barriers and that need to be overcome that I don't know that there are just presently are folks in Oregon who are doing this. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of who is doing what from my contacts with people over the years, and so I think that maybe I'm not being super clear, but I just don't know that there is anybody who is necessarily operating in that way because of the loopholes. And part of my goal in going through that would be to understand what that is, so that maybe in the future we could open up the ability to do artisanal cheeses as a future factor in Oregon. But yeah, I don't know of anybody.
I saw an article just the other day about Rogue River cheese being featured at the White House during a state dinner with French President Emmanuel Macron. And that cheese was advertised as a blue cheese made in Rogue River Valley of Oregon that uses raw milk. And so maybe it's time for us to reach out to Rogue River Creamery, and if anyone has contacts there to discuss their presidential raw milk cheese, we would love an introduction.
Well, sadly, it seems like Rep. McLean is in some Zoom waiting room that we don't know where, sadly, but maybe we should pivot. Taylor, are you available to talk about, I know on Tuesday, you shared how an idea becomes a law, and I'm wondering if maybe I can pull that up and share my screen and you can kind of talk about the raw milk bill and how it's going to go through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, I'm just texting with Representative McLean right now, and she just feels so horrible that she is not able to get onto this Zoom link for some reason, but she did say she wants to make sure that we set up some time for the folks who are all on this call at a later date to have a more one-on-one conversation about this. So Brittany and Alice, let's make sure we get all the emails of folks that we have on tonight's call so that we can set that up. I know she's really feels bad that she's not able to join us this evening. So yeah, happy to do that. You might have to make it a tad bit bigger, or my vision is going to have to drastically improve in the next couple of minutes.
Is that good? I can actually put the, well, I'm sharing my screen. Is that good, or keep going?
Yep, that is great. So can you scroll over a little bit? I can't, part of it's cut off on my screen.
Here we go. Let's start here. How's that?
That is fantastic. So as you all were hearing Alice talk a little bit about the process that FOP used to select policy proposals for the 2023 session, that really was the start here phase, right? Where folks were, identifying problems that existed in everybody's day-to-day, and that idea is ultimately what kind of gets turned into a law, or gets turned into a proposed law that that Representative McLean is putting in for us, and we're working with other legislators to get through this lengthy process. And so, as Alice was talking, the legislature is going to come in January 17th to start their work, and they'll probably end somewhere around June 25th. So as you can tell, there's lots to happen between January 17th when they come in, at the end of June when they will adjourn sine die. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for raw milk producers or raw milk consumers to be able to be involved in this process. And I think that really will happen down at the phase where the committee will start to hold public hearings on our bill. And I think that's where it's going to be so important for producers to talk about the challenges that you all have faced around insurance, being required to have consumers come out to the location where you're producing, all of the things associated with the fixes that hopefully our legislative proposals, if they're passed, will help solve. And of course, there's a lot of opportunity for the legislative language to change between the time it's introduced and in the time that it gets passed or signed by the governor. And that really is that phase around amendments. And I think one of the things that I'll say is, no introduced bill, or very few introduced bills, are perfect. And so there really will be an opportunity, if you all have additional ideas or additional fixes or changes that you'd like to see to the law around raw milk in Oregon, we'll have more opportunities to change our language all the way from January 17th, usually up right until the very end when the legislature actually passes our bill. So getting through the one first chamber. So we have, because Representative McLean is a House member, our bill will start on the House side of the legislature. And then after we do our public hearing and the bill, will get a vote in the committee and pass the House floor with, let's say it gets 60 votes. That's a lot of votes. That would be a unanimous action by the legislature. But let's say that's what happens. And it gets 60 votes. It'll then go on to the other side of the legislative process in the Senate, where the whole process basically starts all over again and goes to a committee on the Senate side, and then the Senate will take up the bill and do a public hearing. So there's lots of opportunities really to underscore that for you all and folks on this webinar to be engaged, because if you're not able to testify or share your story in the House side, there are opportunities on the Senate side to do that. And of course, meeting directly with your legislator and sharing directly via email and other testimony with your legislator, your support for this bill on both sides of the chamber is going to be really important to make sure that the legislature takes this bill seriously and ultimately takes action and passes it. So those are usually the two big hurdles. The committees, and then a full vote on the House and Senate floor. And then from there, it really, the process, hopefully, can you scroll down a little bit, Brittany? Hopefully we don't find ourselves in these conference committees. That certainly complicates things for legislative proposals, because that usually means there's more work to be done. And very often we run out of time in the legislative process. So, but as you can see, after you pass the House and the Senate, you really move on to the governor, who has the opportunity to sign or veto the bill. So, again, another opportunity to share with elected leaders your support for this policy proposal, and really encourage folks to take action on it. And then all that to say, sometimes you pass a really great bill and it's all great, and then you learn that there are additional changes that you need to make in future legislative sessions, or maybe we didn't get everything that we asked for in the 2023 session and need to come back in future sessions. And then that's when the process really, really starts all back over again, because we go all through it all over again. So that is just a real quick, too long, didn't read version of how a bill becomes a law. But I don't know, Brittany or Alice, if there's anything specific you'd like me to focus on this chart too.
No, thanks. I think that's great. I think the important part is just letting people know when the step, I think it's really important to mention too, is the call to actions are so quick. It's just sometimes we get 24 hours notice of needing help, and it's really essential and important that especially farmers are there to talk about their stories with the legislators. And so yeah, thanks for sharing that, Taylor. All right, is there any more questions that we need to answer?
I think we have exhausted our questions. The ones that are still present are things that I think we've touched on and were asked a couple different ways. I do want to say that although COVID is not as bad as it was before, and the legislature is having a hybrid session this year, we will not be doing our FOF Rally Day at the Capitol in 2023 because now it's under construction and there's very limited access to public spaces at the Capitol. So we are having our Small Farms Mean Business Rally in Eugene, Oregon this year at the Lane County Farmers Market Pavilion. They have so generously partnered with us at their new dedicated space in downtown Eugene, and the city of Eugene is welcoming us to have this rally on this at the pavilion, which is an entire city block. And it is right across from the street from the courthouse. And we are going to be convening there on March 5th. And we'll be talking a lot about raw milk. We'll be talking about our other priority, Farm Direct, making improvements to that law. And we'll also be hearing from our partners in coalition about issues like double up food bucks, as well as the Oregon Organic Plan, some soil health legislation, and factory farm moratoriums, and all kinds of things that we work on across the spectrum of making small and independent farming a viable living here in Oregon, and building the food system and agricultural future that we know that all the folks on the call today want to see. So thank you so much for your support. We do have a couple of events coming up in January, as we mentioned. The first week of January, like right after the new year, on January 3rd, we'll be doing a workshop, the third of our advocacy workshops, with Ubaldo from Comunidades at Columbia Riverkeeper. And that is going to be training on how to tell your story to the media for advocacy, how to work with the media to accomplish your goals and get your, to do advocacy through media coverage, pretty much. So if that's something that you are interested in, I know something that we hear from farmers, and we get approached by reporters who want to talk to a farmer. but that is often a daunting experience. And if it's not something you've done before, it can be really intimidating. So we want to give you the tools to make sure that you're represented the way that you want to be, and you can use that opportunity to give the truth of your story out to the world. That workshop is going to be 6 to 7:30 on Tuesday, January 3rd. And then we will be having our coalition partner bills to watch panel on our InFARMation on Thursday, January 5th. So January 3rd, advocacy training, January 5th, InFARMation, and March 5th, that's a Sunday, we're going to be having our rally in Eugene, and we'd love to see you all there. We will be providing transportation from the Portland area and the Bend area and possibly other parts of the state. If there is a will, we will help you find a way. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you during the session.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah and Christine, for coming. We really appreciate you being on the panel.
Thank you for having us. I know Christine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you have any parting words, feel free.
Sorry. I just, anyone is welcome to reach out to me at any time. If you have any questions about us specifically, I would love to engage more with people on this topic. I'm excited to build a more local food community. So thank you for being here.
Same, if I can be of any help or a lifeline for any of the producers on the call, or anybody that's interested in becoming a producer, always happy to share. It is not a competition, it is a cooperation in this community, and we need more producers doing this kind of work. So thank you, Taylor and Alice and Brittany and Heather, for putting this on tonight, and also for bringing this issue up and trying to help us find a solution to help small farms moving forward. It is definitely with not an easy haul, and we appreciate all the support you guys have provided. So it's looking forward to the steps and then the months ahead, and just really working to help others in this industry.
Our pleasure. Well, thank you so much. We'll definitely, everybody will be hearing from us, and have a great night. I'll send resources and the video link if you'd like to share it with your friends tomorrow. All right, everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.